My name is Mariana Barham. I am a member of the Doddridge County Watershed Association. The Watershed Association in Doddridge County has been active for the last 3 or 4 years. I sort of got on board a couple of years ago just because I was interested in protecting the county as far as water goes, and there's so much going on. The folks that are here this evening, we have Elise Keaton, who is from the Greenbrier Watershed Association, which is actively trying to do something as far as protecting the natural resources from the onslaught with the 42-inch pipelines that are actually originating in our area in Harrison County and Doddridge County. Elise has a long history with dealing with some of this stuff. There are also 2 additional folks who I have not met. They are, I believe, attorneys with Appalachian
Mountain Advocates.
Mountain Advocates, and they are attorneys, correct?
Yes,
that have been helping and dealing with some of the stuff that's been going on as far as mountaintop removal and other things that have been having adverse effects on our state. So the Doddridge County Watershed Association, or our association, meets every 3rd Thursday of the month. We meet here at the Senior Center at 6 p.m. Our meetings are completely open and anyone is welcome to attend. Some of the things that we have done has been stream cleanups, we've done water testing, and just a bunch of different stuff. There are some brochures on the table in the back that has information about our organization, as well as telephone numbers related if you see spills that are affecting the waterways in your area. So it's handy information to have, especially with what's going on in our region. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Elise, but I would ask if any of you that have not signed, we have some sign-in sheets that are going around. We'd appreciate it if you could sign in. We're not going to be selling the names or using them in that way at all, okay? So we just want to know how many people showed up and stuff, and to try to determine whether or not it's worth it for us to continue hosting these informational meetings. So that's up to you. So Elise, can everybody see the screen up here? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you, Elise.
My name is Elise Keaton. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Greenbrier River Watershed Association. And the first thing I want to do is mention this pipeline fact sheet that's at the back of the room on the table. This is something we've put together specifically for tonight's meeting that outlines some detailed information about Doddridge County, and it also has my contact information on the back at the bottom. So I'm not handing out business cards tonight. If you'd like to stay in contact with me, grab one of these sheets and you'll have my contact information. This PowerPoint is intended to bring everybody to some common understanding around the pipelines, what you all are facing up here, and who FERC is and what their role is in this process. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Some folks in this room know a great deal about this topic, some folks don't know very much about it, and this is intended to kind of bring us all to some common understanding about what the discussion is. After I finish the presentation, which will take a little over 10 minutes, I'll hand the floor to Joe Lovett and Isaac Howell, who will talk a little bit about generally some legal issues with the pipelines, and then they'll answer questions, specific questions that landowners or property owners may have about what their rights are as they pertain to the pipelines. So I'll go ahead and get started. So in doing the research for tonight and putting this information together, what I discovered is there are 4 pipelines and then 1 supply line that will potentially impact this area, either Doddridge County, Harrison County, or Lewis County. So this map illustrates the 3 biggest pipelines that we're following: the Western Marcellus, or the Transco pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is depicted in yellow, and then the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And of course, you can tell that all of them originate near this area. The Mountain Valley Pipeline actually starts in Wetzel County. It is, according to the pre-filing documents from FERC, a 42-inch pipeline that's proposed to travel 330 miles down through kind of central West Virginia into Summers County, Monroe County, near the southern part of the state, and then over into Virginia, where it will connect with the Transco line in Pennsylvania County. So it's 330 miles and it's 42 inches. So this is one pipeline that originates in Wetzel County that will travel through Harrison, a little small part of Doddridge, and Lewis County. The timeline for this pipeline, the pre-filing papers went in at the end of October. That means that they're contacting stakeholders. FERC has a pre-filing phase where the companies who want to propose the pipeline say, here's our plan. We're going to, build this size pipeline. It'll travel this many miles. Here are the people that we anticipate will be impacted, and they kind of start getting their feelers out there. They'll be having open house meetings about these pipelines, and I have another sheet of paper back on the table that has some dates and locations of these open house meetings. This is where industry folks who are actually working on these pipelines will join with representatives from FERC and come into your communities. The interesting thing about their meeting list is they don't have any times listed on their meetings. So what I've done is I've provided the contact information for the lady with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so you should call her and find out when the meetings are, and I would encourage each one of you to call her separately to ask about that. Let's see, I skipped ahead here. Let's go back one. So another big pipeline that we're looking at is the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, or the Dominion Pipeline. And this map shows the entire course of that pipeline from Harrison County all the way down into Virginia, and it also goes down into North Carolina. So this one's about 550 miles long. It's also 42 inches in diameter. So you can tell these are the biggest of the pipelines in terms of size. This is where the Dominion, or the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, starts in Harrison County. So this is Harrison County, Doddridge County, and Lewis County. So it starts right here and travels through Lewis County into Upshur County. So the Atlantic Coast Dominion Pipeline doesn't necessarily impact Doddridge County, and I'm going to skip ahead, but what does is this, what they call the Supply Header Project. So this is a 36-inch pipe in West Virginia that will attach essentially to the end of this Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So the Atlantic Coast Pipeline starts here in Harrison, and it attaches to Harrison and travels through Doddridge County to Wetzel County, or from Wetzel County through Doddridge to the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, depending on how you look at how it's built. The project schedule for this supply header is similar to what we see with the other two big pipelines. They're in the pre-filing stages right now with FERC. Their formal application is expected to go in this summer. So I think it's important, and the attorneys will talk more about this, but if you hear people saying that these pipelines are a done deal, or it's already in the process, there's nothing we can do, that's far from the truth. FERC has not approved any of these applications yet. They're very early in the process, and I'll show a flow chart that shows you how early we are in the process in a minute. Then, when we were setting up this meeting with the Doddridge County Watershed Association, we learned about the Rover Pipeline, which is a fourth big pipeline that is actually will encompass 24-inch, 30-inch, 36-inch, and 42-inch pipelines at various phases. And this pipeline essentially starts in Wetzel County and goes, it starts in Doddridge County. And this is a fuzzy map. I took a capture of a bigger map, but it starts in Doddridge County and travels up through Ohio and eventually to Michigan, where it goes into Canada and connects with a larger pipeline there. So you've got two pipelines. Yes?
Elise, that pipeline that starts in Doddridge starts at the top of Flint Hill at the Dallas compressor station, goes to Mark West. It's 36-inch. From the Mark West plant, it's a 42-inch line that heads northwest, goes into Ohio, through Michigan, and then into Canada.
Thank you, Mariana. That's It's a huge line, and again, if you go back to kind of the statistics on this, this is an 820-mile long pipeline. So that's a substantial area that they're traveling with this pipeline. The projected schedule for this, the Rover pipeline is actually a little further ahead of schedule than the other pipelines. They pre-filed with FERC last summer. So where they are, they're going to submit their formal application to FERC, we expect in January of 2015. And then if they get approved for construction, it would be as early as November 15 that they would start construction. Now for the other pipelines, November 2015 is when the formal filing with FERC would happen. So this one's a little bit ahead of schedule. And then their in-service date is projected to be December 2016. Now I don't know if folks have been commenting on this with FERC or not, but I'll give you some information at the end that will help you participate in this process. Yes?
2 nights ago, on Tuesday night, FERC was in Payton City, which is just 2 counties over, it's in Wetzel, and they were taking comments, official comments on this particular Rover pipeline.
On the Rover pipeline.
Yeah, and they had a full house, and it was full of, half the room was full of union people with orange t-shirts on, and the comments were about 8 people, 9 people from the union spoke, and there were three of us, 3 to 4, that raised questions.
Okay.
I spoke there, and they're continuing to take formal comments because the comment period is now open
Okay.
on that.
I appreciate you pointing that out. When I get to my last slide, what I provide is where you can go online to submit comments. If you didn't make it to one of these meetings, where you can go online to submit comments and what the docket number is for all 4 of these projects. So I'll give you that information. You can either write it down or we can follow up and I'll make sure you have it. The next few slides are just to help people understand who haven't seen pictures of what these proposed pipelines look like, what the impact is on the land. For the 42-inch pipelines, particularly for the Mountain Valley Pipeline and for the Atlantic Coast Dominion Pipeline, they're studying a 300-foot corridor. How many people in here have received a survey letter to ask to come on your land to take a look? So a handful of folks have. So what they're looking at is a 300-foot corridor to study. And once they hone in on the path that they'd like to take, they're going to ask for a 125-foot construction easement, which is what you see here. And it takes 125 feet because this is a big pipeline and they have to move these big machines in there. Once they bury the pipeline and finish out the easement, then there will be a 75-foot permanent easement there if the pipeline is approved. So a lot of numbers are going around. The study corridor is 300 feet, the construction easement is 125 feet, and then the permanent easement that will be there once they bury the pipeline is 75 feet. This is a 42-inch pipeline being constructed in Nebraska, and this gives you some idea of the width and the breadth of the construction easement size. These are men here standing beside this pipeline, so this is a big project, and this is in rolling terrain. I think what we're seeing here in West Virginia is the terrain is much steeper, and what this picture indicates is actually bulldozers cabled to these big pieces of equipment on these very steep inclines, because these big, huge pieces of equipment can't hold their ground on a very steep incline, so you actually have to have machines assisting with this. And you can see there, one of the interesting things about this picture, there are no ditches to prevent the erosion and the sediment from going down into the stream. So that's one of the issues that I think folks will be looking at. The next few slides came directly from a FERC meeting that was held in the field this past summer. So this is information that FERC provides on who they are and what the process is with them. So FERC is the federal regulatory agency that's specifically tasked with monitoring and regulating interstate natural gas lines. And they work under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, to generate some of the environmental protection or environmental assessment around what these pipelines will do. So that's the governing law that they're looking at in terms of the environmental impacts. Their role is also to coordinate other state and federal agencies that have an interest in this. For example, the Forestry Service or the Corps of Engineers and the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. FERC acts as kind of the coordinator that facilitates the conversation between all these different entities. And they also take public comment from citizens who have issues around this, who want to articulate it. The thing I want to point out is that through this process, they maintain a comprehensive record of all the documents and comments that are filed. So the website I'm going to give you in the last part of my presentation is the place where you can go to find where they are in the process, what documents they filed, and if you sign up to receive, it's called e-subscribe. You can actually receive an email every time someone submits a comment on this website. So I'm subscribed to it, and anytime anybody submits a comment to FERC, I get an email and I can read who they are, where they are, which pipeline they're talking about, and what they're saying. And so that's really interesting for us to see what the conversation is from folks. This flow chart is a big chart that has a lot of little words. I don't want you to worry about reading it. What I want to point out is here's where we are. The pre-filing process is at this stage. And so these are all the steps that we have to go through before there's an issued notice to proceed with construction. So we're still very early in this process, and the public comments are important, and we need to be submitting those regularly to FERC. So this last slide is really an important slide, and I'm going to leave it up even as I turn the floor over to the attorneys who are here to talk tonight. FERConline.ferc.gov. There is no www. If you type in www, it won't take you there. So it's just the http://ferconline.ferc.gov. And when you get there, you'll have to put in your contact information and let them know who you are, and then you can enter a docket number. And so for the Atlantic Coast Dominion Pipeline, you see the docket number, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the Rover Pipeline Project, and then the Dominion Supply Header. So these are all the docket numbers for the pre-filing dockets. Yes?
Can you possibly make that available so we can post it on the Doddridge County Watershed Association Facebook page?
May I do that by emailing it to
Yes.
you? Okay,
Yes.
that's probably the easiest
So we
way.
can get it out to people.
The other thing I wanted to point out is on this information sheet, there's a website called Mayor Project, M-A-R-E project.org. That is a bit of a clearinghouse site for information about the number of the different pipelines that are proposed. What you'll find there is information about upcoming community meetings. These meetings are happening all over the state. We're having them in Monroe County, Summers County, Greenbrier County, Pocahontas, Randolph County. Anywhere the pipeline may impact, we're having these meetings. What we're doing is we're also blogging about how those meetings go, who is there, what people are saying, so you can learn what the community sentiment is along the course of this pipeline. The other thing you can find there is maps and information generally. So people are using that website to kind of get up to speed and using it as a primer for what's going on. So again, that's www.mareproject.org. And I would encourage you to pick up one of these.
Can you get to the parcel level maps from the Mayor Project website?
Yes, as I recall, Dan put those on there, so the parcel level maps are on there. There are maps that the companies have put out now that show where the land parcels are in relation to the pipeline. So if you have to do a little bit of groundwork to go to your assessor's office and actually identify what property is there, but you can piece together then who the property owners are who may be impacted.
Do the local governments have anything to do, the county governments have anything to do with these pipelines? Are they regulating them in any way, or is this strictly a national regulatory, federal regulatory thing?
I'd say it's a federal regulatory issue at this point because of the interstate nature. The county commissions are meeting and they're facilitating the conversation at the county level, but they don't really have a legally binding say in what happens. They're tasked with upholding the safety of the people in the county, so there may be some arguments to be made that by articulating or issuing a resolution opposing the pipeline, that could fall under their I guess, purview as a commission. Your state, federal elected officials are people who, at the state level, you could contact about this, and I'll let Joe talk a little more about who's in this process. Yes.
Everybody that's vicinity has been approached by a Mountaineer Keystone. I was approached a couple weeks ago by a landman.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's part of that project there or what's going on.
This is a perfect segue to let me hand it over to Joe, and he'll be able to help you out, okay? Thank y'all so much.
Thanks, Elise. My name's Joe Lovett. I'm a lawyer, and I run an organization called Appalachian Mountain Advocates. We work in West Virginia, Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And we've worked over the years on a lot of coal issues and lately on some fracking issues in Wetzel County. This is the first time I've been to Doddridge County. And this is also the first time I've been to the northern part of the state talking about these pipelines, because they've just sort of snuck up on us. You all have probably known about them a little longer. We have these 4 pipelines proposed, plus a 5th pipeline by Transco that runs from somewhere up here. I think it's a Doddridge. I think it probably starts in Doddridge County and goes back down through Virginia, like all of them do, through different routes through West Virginia. Now, these are 42-inch pipelines, with the exception of the Rover pipeline, which I think Elise just said ranges from 30 to 42. And I don't know if you've been following the news about the Keystone XL pipeline that runs from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. That's a 30-inch pipeline. So we've got 4 42-inch pipelines, which are tremendous pipelines, running from northern West Virginia down through Virginia and into North Carolina. And as you all know, it's all related to fracking. So in the part of the state, in Greenbrier County where I live, the only impacts we're going to have is a pipeline. And that's not a pipeline is something that's going to harm the value of people's property who it goes across, but we're pretty much opposed to fracking. So let me talk a little bit about, I'm not going to make this a fracking meeting because it's about the pipelines, but the pipelines and fracking are inextricably linked. The only reason that we have the pipelines is because of fracking, and if we get 4 or 5 new pipelines, well, there's going to be a lot of capacity to get gas out of Pennsylvania and northern West Virginia, and probably down into southern West Virginia as well, because we have Marcellus Shale in Greenbrier County and in Monroe County and in Pocahontas County. But lucky for us, it's not as economical to frack there as it is here. So you guys, in Wetzel County in particular, I think, have taken the brunt of the fracking so far. But these pipelines are going to move it down in the southern part of the state as well. And that's a problem for us, and for many reasons. Not just because we live there, but because I believe that we should be making a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And these pipelines are going to make that impossible. For instance, the infrastructure associated with coal mining is the only reason we have mountaintop removal in southern West Virginia now. Coal prices have crashed, and you all probably know, partly because of gas prices. I mean, gas is really running coal out of West Virginia right now. And the only reason it's still going on is because of the infrastructure that was been built over the last 100 years to support the coal industry. The trains, the locks on the rivers, the prep plants, all that infrastructure. And these pipelines are the first big infrastructure pieces that are coming for gas to West Virginia. And I think that the pipelines are going to have an effect similar throughout the state to the effect that we had from coal mining 100 years ago. We're just starting to see what kind of economy we're going to have for the future. So you all have been impacted by fracking for a long time, but this state and this region generally are standing at a crossroads, and we need to decide whether we want to have a future based on fossil fuel industry with, as you all know, I mean, it's a boom and bust industry owned by out-of-state companies, and that's what I'm afraid we're heading for again if we don't make a different and more responsible decision. Now, the pipelines are before FERC, as you heard Elise say, and FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And there was a question that somebody asked about county government. Because this is a federal process, federal law supersedes county law, and for that matter, state law. In fact, if your property is condemned, it's a federal case. You go to federal court or into a federal process to determine the value of your property. So what is FERC's role? FERC is an agency that's charged with, most importantly, granting the right of eminent domain to the pipeline company. And that's why it's important for all of these pipelines to get what's called a certificate of need and convenience from FERC. Because FERC will grant them the right to take your property if you know, they're going to come across your property. And did somebody say there's another pipeline just now that we had? So what is that?
I was approached by a landman in Mountaineer Keystone out of Wexford, Pennsylvania.
Did he tell you anything about it?
He said it was coming from Dodge County to the southern end of Harrison County and ended up in Harvey County.
And it ended there, so it's not a...
Well, that's where they're connecting to.
It's going to connect to another pipeline that's already in Barber County. Well, it must be a smaller pipe. It must be a smaller pipeline than these because we don't have any pipelines of...
I think the gas line's going to be 24 inch and the water line, he wanted the water line too for 14 inches.
The water lines for fracking, do you think?
That's what they're for. 3 feet under the ground and the gas line's 8,000 feet under the ground.
Well, we're going to become a pipeline state here, so it's good that people, I mean, you know, we can talk about this and learn our rights and figure out what we can do. Now, a lot of people in southern West Virginia, where we've been talking, we've been in Monroe County, in Summers County, in Greenbrier County, we've been down into Virginia talking to people. A lot of landowners like the idea of the pipeline because the company has to purchase an easement from them and it provides some income. And I personally am opposed to these pipelines. As I said, I think we should be making a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But I also think that it's important that people not get crosswise with each other. We're all in this together. And so, you know, if our neighbors want to make a deal with the pipeline company, well, I think that's the right, because we have private property in this country, and that's one of the rights that's being challenged by FERC. So what FERC does, FERC was granted by Congress the right to take your property or to give the right to take your property to a private company. It's really an extraordinary thing. We always thought in this country that the government could take your property if it needed it, if it could show it needed it and show that it needed it for public use. But because of some recent cases and some fairly recent rulings, we now know that the federal government can give the right to a private company to take your property if FERC decides it's for a public use. And FERC generally does determine that things are for public use. It's an agency that likes to grant these certificates, to give them out pretty easily. That said, I think there are many pipelines here, and it's going to be difficult for FERC to grant a certificate of need to all of them. But the main thing that you need to take away from this is that FERC can grant the right of eminent domain to any of these pipeline companies, and that's what they're all trying to get. And that means they can take your property. Now, they can't just take your property for whatever they think it's worth. What a company will typically do is come and make an offer to a landowner for a piece of property. Let me distinguish this a little bit. You know, with fracking, you had an issue up here. We've been involved with it with people who own only their surface rights and others who own mineral rights as well. This is purely, the pipelines are purely a surface issue. They have to pay you for your surface regardless of whether you own your mineral. So that's important for people to understand. And it's also important to understand they can come now and try to buy your property from you. And you could sell it, you're free to sell it. But one thing I would say is please never sell your property or a right-of-way or an easement to use your property without hiring a lawyer. Okay, and I know I'm a lawyer and what I'm saying may be suspect because it's coming from a lawyer. But you should not sign anything without talking to a lawyer. And I hope that lawyers will represent you on a contingency basis. That means that they won't make you pay money up front, but that they would take a percentage of what you sell the easement for if you sell it. And to make it better for you, I think that lawyers should only take a contingent fee based on what you get more than what the company made in an original offer to you. So you have no risk. So let's say you own a piece of property and the pipeline company comes and says, I'll give you $10,000 for this easement. And you say, that's not enough. They say, well, that's what we're paying everybody. We're paying, you know, $500 a foot or $50 a foot. That's all we're paying. Then you should go get a lawyer if you can. And that lawyer should represent you, I think, and take a percentage of what you get above $10,000. Because that was your original offer. So you really have no risk in hiring a lawyer under those circumstances. Because that lawyer then is invested in getting you as much money as he can get for you, or as she can get for you. So please, the main thing is don't sign anything unless you have a lawyer. And again, another analogy to southern West Virginia. If you go to Boone County, Mingo County, Logan County, McDowell County, those counties, and to some extent up here too, but especially down there, the mineral rights and the surface rights were bought for a song in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And the reason, whatever your view of coal mining is, the reason we have mountaintop removal in southern West Virginia today is because landowning companies 100 years ago put together pieces of property so that they controlled tracts of 100,000 acres that they could blow up. If they didn't control that, then we wouldn't have mountaintop removal now. So please make sure that if you want to sell your property even before the eminent domain process, you hire a lawyer to do that. Now, if you want to hold out, we will try to stop these pipelines, or at least some of them. Because what FERC has to do is make several determinations, but the most important determination is it has to determine that there's a need for these pipelines. And that means that there can't be excess capacity. And the company, the pipeline company, should have to prove to FERC that it has a market. In fact, it's already signed up producers to fill this pipeline with gas. Because FERC has this extraordinary power to take your property. And the courts have said it may only give that power if there is a real need for it. And so this is where the need comes in. And so if there's too much capacity in the pipelines, FERC should not approve all of the pipelines. Now, this is unprecedented. We've never been in a situation where we had one 42-inch pipeline. Now we've got 3 42-inch pipelines and a 30-inch pipeline proposed all at the same time, and I'm sure we've got more to come. So I don't know what FERC's going to do here, but we're going to put FERC through its paces and make sure it performs the economic assessment it has to perform before it approves these pipelines. Now, if it does approve it, though, as I said, the company will have the right of eminent domain, and it's going to come then to any landowner and say, okay, we've got the right of eminent domain, your property is ours. It's not that simple. Still, the pipeline company, or any party that has the right of eminent domain, must pay you the value of what it's taking. Again, it's going to, as natural, undervalue that. And what you need to do, again, is don't sign anything, but hire a lawyer, and that lawyer should work on a contingency basis for you, the way I've described, and he or she should hire an appraiser. And that appraiser will look at the diminution of your value, to the value of your property as a whole. Not just to the little, not little, but I guess the 125-foot easement across the property, but look to the devaluation of your piece of property as a whole. And there are going to be a lot of things from the pipeline that's going to devalue your property. They have to monitor the pipeline. There'll be airplanes flying over to make sure that there aren't leaks. Some people say there are going to be drones in place of airlines, and you know, I imagine that that's possible sometime in the future. There's no such thing yet. And there's going to be pesticide sprayed. Companies are going to need access to their pipelines. It opens up your property to a pipeline company that really doesn't share your interest in preserving your property as a farm or a home place or a woodlot or whatever it is. So you need to protect yourself, and when you sign anything, you can put in that contract or deed the kinds of protections that you need, and a lawyer can help you do that. So as well as raising the price, a lawyer who's experienced in this will know some of the pitfalls, some of the things that companies can harm you with, and make sure that before the company gets the right to your easement, that it agrees not to do certain things that will protect you. Somebody had a question over there. It's asked, yes.
The Dominion supply header, that's following, it's adjacent to an existing pipeline, which is actually on my road. And I found some of the old deeds on that. And when they signed in 1964, it says that they have the right, a lot of people signed this, to put another pipeline within 30 feet of the old one.
Right.
Is that how that's going to be? Will they have any rights?
Let me say right now, okay, I got to make a disclaimer. So I am a lawyer, but I'm not here giving you legal advice
Well, I mean,
individually.
can they just take it if that's...
You need to look at your deed specifically. And so what I would recommend, I mean, I'm just trying to tell you generally what the law is here now, but I can't look at your specific cases because I don't know. That would take somebody to sit down with you. I'll be glad after this meeting.
Not me personally, it's not on my land, but that whole supply header, if you read the FERC thing, it's following that existing pipeline.
If it follows that existing pipeline, it depends exactly on what the agreements that were signed say. It is possible that those agreements give the pipeline company the right to place another pipeline there without further payment. But I wouldn't just take that for granted without reading carefully the language, even if it appears to say that. You know, lawyers are sneaky, and something that appears to say one thing may actually mean something completely different. So tell your neighbor, whoever you know, not just to take the word for it, but to check with somebody. And I'll be glad to talk to people if they want about their individual issues, but you know, I can't give you like legal advice standing right here, right now. I can only tell you generally what the law is. Yes?
Is there an environmental assessment required either by the applicant or by the FERC staff?
Yes, there is. And so I said that FERC's main obligation here is to determine whether there's a need for the pipeline, but it also has to make environmental determinations under what Elise mentioned under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Whenever there's a major federal action, NEPA comes into play, and the pipeline company will work with FERC to do an environmental impact study. And you shouldn't take too much comfort from that, because all of that is it's a procedure. The company could determine that there's going to be significant environmental harm, and FERC could still issue the permit so long as they looked at the environmental impacts. There's no requirement in NEPA that environmental impacts be reduced, only that they be considered and understood. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers will probably also have to issue permits here, because pipelines will be crossing waters of the United States, which is any wetland, most wetlands and streams in the state. So that's another federal permit that will have to be issued, and with that come NEPA obligations as well as Real Clean Water Act obligations. So there will be some environmental statutes at play here, and we're going to look very carefully at those too. And I would encourage each of you to write letters to FERC. And I know there are form letters floating around from environmental groups, and they're on the web, and I'm sure people are passing them out here, and that's better than nothing. But I would rather see somebody write one paragraph of what they really think about this pipeline and how it will impact their community or their property, and send that to FERC, rather than only sending a form letter that FERC gets and just puts in a file. But if you write, for instance, that it's going to cross a particular creek on my property, and the slopes are steep, and if they take the trees off, there's going to be erosion, and that's going to get in the stream. You know, those kinds of things, I think that the more of that gets to FERC, the better off we are, because FERC will have to look at those things individually. So the short answer is yes. There must be an environmental impact study. The long answer is like we're going to spend a lot of time commenting on it, but in the long term, I think the most important determination is going to be whether these pipelines are needed or not. Yes?
I just want to point out there's also the requirement for cultural impact studies, so archaeological digs, any sort of cemeteries, things like that is also required for the company to at least assess the impact that the pipeline will have on those things.
Yes.
Well, what if, nobody's approached you about the pipeline, but you still have concerns?
You should still write to FERC and explain what those concerns are. I think in the room only a handful. How many people again have gotten survey letters? Well, quite a few of you actually. How many people have let them survey that got the letters? So a little more than half.
They actually came on the property and surveyed me without any notification at all.
Right. Well, in West Virginia,
Eminent domain, blah, 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 blah.
in West Virginia, so I believe they do not have the right to do that. And if anybody wants to not let them on, Isaac especially knows, sitting here, who's with me, Isaac Howe, he knows more about the survey issue than I do. He's been looking into it. But Isaac has persuaded me that, so if he's wrong, it's his fault. But he's persuaded me that you don't have to let them on to do the survey yet. I don't think there's any great harm that you've done by letting them on, even if you don't want it built, because all they've really done is walk your property and look for the route. On the other hand, and a lot of people want to go out and show them things on their property so that they won't go near, a cemetery or a special place. And so a lot of landowners will want to go out with them and say, please make sure when you're surveying my property, you realize that there's this cemetery here, or there's this stream here, or I'd like to build a house here someday. They don't care where you want to build a house, but that's something you could tell them. But if you're a landowner and you don't want to let them survey, you should talk to Isaac or me after this meeting, and we'll be glad to try to help you with that. And we won't charge you. Like I say, we're a nonprofit law firm. That's not an oxymoron, but we are a nonprofit law firm, and we work on environmental issues in these states. So we don't charge people when we do legal work for them. And some people say, you get what you pay for. But
So what are you saying with that comment?
yes.
Can they sue you for holding them up?
Yeah, yes, they can. I don't think sue is probably the right word. They can take you to court and assert they have a right to go on your property. And that's why I'm saying I think you should have a lawyer for that process, and we would be happy to talk with you about that. I think really what they're going to try to do is just get on your property, because you haven't really caused them any damage. The law is that, well, Isaac, why don't you say what the law is for their right?
Well, it allows them to conduct the survey, but it says that the pipeline has to be for public use. And that hasn't been determined for any of these pipelines, and it hasn't been determined, as far as we can tell, by any court in West Virginia. And just as Joe was talking about putting FERC through their paces, you're entitled to put these companies through their paces and show that the pipeline is for public use to trigger that right under the statute.
Yes.
To be forewarned, when I approached them, they brought up armed security.
Huh. Really?
They didn't with me about it. I left, went home, and about 10 minutes later, I was visited by the state police, that they were concerned I might cause a problem.
And were they coming onto your property over your objection?
Yes.
And did they?
But part of the problem is, as a part owner, there's issues there. But they were very deceptive about whether they had eminent domain permission to enter the property or not.
They do not have eminent domain. They do not have the right of eminent domain until FERC says that they do.
Well, what they tried to do was they showed me a document, I have a copy of it, with no name on it, no address, okay, indicating that eminent domain. And that's when the word started. Because it said, well, this does not apply to any specific property. That's when they brought over the security personnel, who made it very clear to me that he was an off-duty Ohio police officer, to make certain that none of his people were harassed.
That's a sad story.
That's
Well,
very
But I
forward.
mean, they actually then had the state police at my place wanting to know if I was gonna go back, because they said they're gonna leave them. Okay, and I said, fine, guys, see you later. You're not coming back tomorrow, right? They said, we won't be back, we're done. So then I said, okay, talk to y'all later, see you, fine. And, swear, a half an hour later, I'm gonna get the report, the state police were there, inquiring whether I was gonna come back down and harass them.
Well, I think the state police just don't, they're not supposed to understand this law.
Right.
And, I mean, you don't want to do anything to upset
No,
a state
I
trooper,
agree.
right? I mean, that's generally not a good thing to do.
Although I know in some counties, some folks are notifying the police and the local prosecutor of the law, of this statute, of the problems with the statute, getting the prosecutor, getting the police on board with a problem before it becomes a big problem, and getting them in a position to, potentially prosecute someone for trespassing on your land. But it's, in our view, it's the job of the courts to determine whether they're entitled to come on. And it shouldn't be happening at your fence with an
It's there, all
off-duty.
flagged out, they've surveyed it, there's flags everywhere for both these pipelines coming through Dodge County.
Well, they are taking the position that they have this right already. And to be fair, it's unclear in the law whether they have the right or not. And that's something a court's going to have to decide. My Isaac, as I said, has persuaded me that they probably don't have the right yet. But it's not 100% clear. But generally what happens is if somebody's going to trespass on your property, which is what I think they're doing when they come on and trespass, you call the sheriff. The sheriff comes out and says, you stay off of their property until you get a court order, and then the pipeline company should have to go to court to get an order. And if that happens, I mean, this is the rational way for this to go, and I think the way it should go. If you want help, we'll be glad to go to court with you to help oppose that court order. But again,
We'll talk.
talk with us, yeah, about that.
Jody was saying.
Would you recommend, or if you can't recommend, I'm wondering, would it not be a good idea to post no trespassing?
It cannot hurt. It cannot hurt, but they will ignore it, is my guess.
But then you have
Because they don't
stated
think
your
it
intention
does not think,
non-verbally.
you could put a sign up, and I've seen people do this, say, I understand that you gas pipeline company may be coming here to survey. You do not have my permission to enter my land.
Right.
I don't know, Isaac and I are working on a case in Virginia now on this very issue under Virginia law that's gotten farther along, and it's actually in court, and motions are being filed, and so in Virginia, they're farther along on these pipeline issues than we are. Yes, sir.
Just a little insight on Dominion Gas Company. Last summer, they redid the 282 line, which runs through my farm. And they brought out a security guy like he was talking about. And the security guy came to my house and said, I have to meet with you. And he came in and handed me a pamphlet on terrorism. And he says, one of the 7 signs of terrorism is taking pictures of them doing their job. And he also went as far as telling me that I talked to every worker in the field down there and wanted to know if they felt threatened. And I was very taken back by this.
Sure.
And then the next thing you know, the sheriff is on my doorstep and he says, is there a problem here? Well, I'm a real proponent of constitutional rights, and I said, well, I want to face my accuser. And he said, well, I can't name that for you. He says, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any problem being going on here. But they have their own little army from Richmond, Virginia, which are called head thumpers. And that's exactly
Have they actually thumped any heads?
Well, they were intimidating me. Is what
Yeah,
they
well, I'm
wanted to
sure,
do.
I don't doubt that for a minute. You know, in terms of you being a terrorist, of course, that's ludicrous. You're trying to protect your property rights, which is something guaranteed in the United States Constitution. It's as far from communism or a terrorist thing as you could possibly be.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Are you a veteran? Are you a veteran?
No, I'm not.
No, you're lucky because veterans are classified as terrorists. Think I'm kidding? Go talk to Border Patrol agent. They got it on the list.
now let me ask something else here. I asked how many people had survey letters. Does anybody have a survey letter that's from a company other than Dominion? Okay, so Rover, anybody, any other company?
Antero.
Antero, that's EQT one, okay.
No, Antero is not EQT. They're two separate companies.
But it's the same pipeline. Is that?
No, NextEra.
Next year, I'm sorry, I got it confused, you're right.
Some
Apologize.
company called Kinder Morgan, and I've never seen anything else about them.
There's another company that are supposedly coming in, starting at the Mark West plant and heading southwest from the Mark West plant in Doddridge County. I can't remember what the name of it is.
Let me ask you guys another question. And it's okay if the answer is yes. From my perspective, we try to work with everybody. Is there anybody here that would like to see these pipelines built? Not one?
Wow.
Okay, so in southern West Virginia, there are people. Yes, sir. You are. Okay. It's a difficult question, and I'm not here to tell you what the right thing is. I'm telling you what I believe. The only thing I'm definitely telling you is don't sell them anything until you get a lawyer. Don't sign a document. That's the main thing I'm here to tell you. My only advice all around is that. Yes, sir.
I had an experience just a couple of years ago when certain companies, well, no, you see the name paper what, they went by the pipeline, couldn't they? Well, they come out and know they could survey. Yeah, I give them Mason County, Christian, good more guy. So they went up, marked it, come back down, and they sent this college girl down to my house, and they said, we measured it, and it's 500 feet to your property. Dad done it ever since 45. I said, where's it going at? She showed me on the land plot. I know it's more than 500 feet. So I said, well, I want to go up and look at it, see where you're going. She said, well, she said, we'll give you 100 foot for sloping. That didn't make sense. I knew what that was. So I went up and measured, took two trustees with me. I'm a preacher. 930 some feet. So my recommendation, they go into your property, go measure yourself. Don't take their measurement. So I contacted the other neighbors. She said, I thought about it. She said, they said around 1,200 feet to my place. She said, they're going off one hill further across the other hill. She said, probably 1,200 feet between two wells. I checked some others around there and they ripped them off bad too.
We have a long history in West Virginia of people from landmen from out of state taking advantage of us, right? I mean,
she laughed out loud when I told her how far.
Yeah,
I hold out for her. I said, you lied to me.
Yes, sir.
You spoke about capacity, unused capacity.
Yes.
The proposed pipelines right now, we don't know any idea about capacity of use in the market that they're going to, but they're depending on altering the ban on exportation of fuel products.
Right.
That's tied into it, right?
Well, I believe Dominion says, and it says it so often and so clearly that I almost believe it, that none of the Dominion pipeline gas is for exportation. That it is going to Duke Energy and will be used all in the United States. The other pipeline companies don't say that. They don't say that. And we all know that when gas gets in the pipeline system, it moves around. But Dominion claims, and I have not verified it one way or the other, that this gas cannot, from this pipeline, get to export.
Well, if you want proof of that, I mean, Dominion specifically asked to have and have been dealing with the Cove Point situation, which was strictly for imported gas, where that was switched, where they can now use that as an export facility.
Right.
So,
well, I have no doubt that much of gas from this part of West Virginia is going overseas, right? It's just going to happen. Yes, sir.
I talked to the guy that made the presentation about the location of Dominion's pipeline, which goes to Virginia. And he told me that it was not going to be exported, but I noticed that they have a very short distance from the easternmost extension of that pipeline to Newport News, which is one of the biggest and most important ports in the United States.
Well, Dominion states unequivocally at this point that none of this gas will be exported.
Now, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
They're saying none of the gas that Dominion owns.
Well, none of the gas that goes into the pipeline, this pipeline will be exported.
Dominion's gas.
I don't think they're saying that. I think they're saying that none of the gas, whoever's gas
But
it
here's
is.
the thing. Once they sell it to another company, all that's null and void. Just happened with Consol Energy.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if it's going to be exported or not. I know that a lot of the gas,
We're not
though,
stupid.
I know
We
a
know
lot of
it
the gas from this county and from other counties around it is going to be exported. There's no doubt
Another
about
sad
that.
thing that's going on in the state that it just boggles my mind of why people are not screaming and crying, is the fact that of all the gas wells that they're drilling in this area, are all around, and it's expanding every day, is gas rates for consumers is increasing. Now, tell me where that makes any sense. You see, listen, I can't scream because I'm one of the lucky few that has, from the shallow wells, have free gas. So see, I really can't stand up and scream because what are they going to say? But the people, my mother, for example, when she told me what just happened, that she got the notice that her rates go increase, ideal time, in the last month.
Sure.
And I said, just as crazy, she, because we talk about this gas drilling all the time because they know what we're going through. They live in another part of a couple counties away. Why is it people crying out about this? I mean, we got a state like Alaska that the people in Alaska get royalty from the oil that's being produced in their state.
Right.
Because the
That should be
state of
happening to West
Alaska owns the minerals. The citizens don't.
Pardon?
The state of Alaska owns the mineral rights, okay?
Do they?
Yeah,
I
they
didn't
do.
know that.
They own it. I just found that recently, whereas in West Virginia, it's individuals, and a lot of those individuals live out of state.
Well, West Virginia could, though, for instance, in coal, there's a severance tax.
Well,
And
West Virginia does have a severance
But
tax.
it's pretty low. The gas severance tax is much
Yes, it
lower.
is.
And we could impose a severance tax, a higher severance tax, and then keep it to develop West Virginia.
In Doddridge County, the severance tax routine was just recently announced at one of the county commission meetings. It tripled. It went from up to something like $1.5 million on the gas severance stuff. And this is what they just announced, and it was almost 3 times what it was last year. All right.
3 times a low number is still a low number.
I know, but the point is, that's how much it increased. Sure. All right, and that's one county.
There are moves in the legislature to try to ensure that there is a much higher severance tax, and that comes back into the state and helps people in the state. Yes? I thought there was somebody else back there that hadn't had a question before. Maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
I didn't hear my question very well. How can we simultaneously challenge them on the providing of the well right away on our land, and who's going to demonstrate, who's going to authenticate the capacity? Is that a FERC?
Yes, that's FERC. FERC will do that. And my organization and lawyers who work with me and others are working now on comments to FERC. We're hiring an economist who will help us look at these issues and write comments to FERC so that FERC understands if there is excess capacity and FERC has to deal with it. So there are 2 things going on, like you say, simultaneously. On the one hand, they're out trying to acquire rights. I don't think they bought any easements yet, have they? Has anybody actually ever heard of anybody?
People have been
They have?
been
They've actually paid for them?
They have actually been signing right-of-way agreements.
And well, signing right-of-way agreements is different from paying for them. Are the agreements sort of options to purchase in the future?
I think that's what they're talking about, maybe.
Because I think this is very uncertain still. Even the route is uncertain. It's going to move and shift a little bit.
To them, that's chump change to get, and then if it happens,
Sure.
they're not going to lose sleep if it takes another route.
Right, so an option to purchase is a different thing,
Yeah.
and that would
But
mean
the
that
thing is, people have to understand that option to purchase, because I went through this.
Right.
And this thing about having the possibility to come in and put gas lines in after they put the initial one and not pay you an extra cent?
Right.
Yes, it can happen.
And that's another reason you need a lawyer before you
Yes,
sign
before you
anything, is so
sign
that
anything.
you make sure that the easement you sign, however, if you do it voluntarily or if it comes from eminent domain, that easement is limited to this particular pipeline. Because you know that they're going to try to slip all kinds of stuff in your contract to give them rights in the future that FERC has not given them the right. All FERC is giving them the right to do is for this pipeline. But they can buy from you, if they want, and if you're willing to sell to them, an easement for future pipelines. And they can sneak that in there. So anyway, again, hire a lawyer. Yes, sir.
At the Rover meeting, there were 10 or 12 who spoke on the jobs. That it's going to be creating so many jobs that's a benefit to the state. Do you know if that's a justification at FERC?
That FERC, I do not know the answer to that. I do believe that FERC will consider it, and I do believe that there are going to be a number of construction jobs. They'll be going to, at least in southern West Virginia, people not from our area who will come in, and it'll be for short-term construction, and then there'll be almost no jobs. The only jobs will be monitoring the pipeline on your property. So there will be a substantial number, there definitely will be a substantial number of short-term jobs constructing the pipeline. I don't know, you know your community better than I do. In Monroe County and Greenbrier County, we don't have a workforce that's capable of doing that, so they're going to be bringing people in to do the pipeline construction.
Exactly. That's what's happening around here.
Yeah.
That's why you got all these
Man camps.
campgrounds.
Yeah,
set
the
up here.
hotels and the campgrounds and the restaurants, fast food restaurants, those people will benefit in the short term, and then we'll be left holding the bag with no jobs associated with it. Yes.
If the pipelines are supposed to be able to be used in 2018, that gives you some idea of how long those jobs are going to last.
Right. I think, is it 2018? Is that when it's?
That's the in-service date for most of these lines, yes. It's 20.
Yes.
I just want to make a statement. You know, a lot of us residents have been putting up with this heavy equipment.
Sure.
The roads are getting beat up. A lot of those bridges are built in 1934.
Right.
They're falling apart.
Yeah, no doubt. It's
So-
terrible, I'm sure.
So how are we going to be compensated for waiting on the side of the road for the heavy equipment that passes by?
We're not.
And these roads are potholes, it's tearing our vehicles up.
I talked to a lawyer about that. I got the answer I didn't want to hear.
That's what you're going to get. If you, all you have to do.
These people pay road taxes just like I do, so
If you
shut
go
up.
to, if you, now I know
That's what I'm told.
that, I know the gas is bad, but if you go to, and I know you've had,
But they're out of state licenses.
just go to Logan County and look what coal trucks do to those roads. And, you know, there's nothing that happens. Yes.
Does FERC give any consideration in their decision-making process to non-cooperation or opposition on the part of landowners along the route?
When they're done.
I believe it does. I believe that, and again, this is the first time I've been through this process. I want to admit that right now, because this is the first time we've had this in this region. My understanding is that FERC does consider that, and somebody asked a question about a county commission, or I don't know what your county commission, it probably likes fracking and pipelines. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But if your county commission has no real power to stop this, but nevertheless, I think if a county commission or politician or your representatives write letters to FERC and say that the community opposes it and that they oppose it, FERC will take that seriously. It's not dispositive, but FERC must take it seriously because it knows that your county commission is elected, or that your state representative is elected, or your state senator, and that he or she wouldn't be saying that if he or she didn't believe the community was behind them, because politicians just do generally what they
But
think
for
we're
the
going to
most
elect.
part, and I can understand this, you know, it's the old thing about money. It's your county commissions is looking for every dollar they can get to do this, that, and the other.
Yep.
So the fracking brings in the severance taxes. So
Yeah, but-
I can see where they, you know, it's. that
But look
rock
at the
and roll
road
tax.
issue that somebody raised. How much money does the county spend on roads to allow the trucks from the fracking companies and now the pipeline companies to use them and tear them up? You have a better sense, you live in this county, and you know whether or not this is a benefit to your county economically. And I think the county commission should also think like any politician should, but not many do, about not just next year, but 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And what will be the result of what we've allowed to happen here today for short-term profit for our county's future. Yes?
Just another insight, Dominion was on my land and the county commission doesn't have any power at all in Doddridge County. They put a stop order because they were in a floodplain and Dominion never stopped for one day. They just kept working right through that with stop order after stop order after stop order. And if I had an order from a court and I didn't do anything like they said, they would come and arrest me.
They sure would.
But the county commission had, their hands were like, what do we do?
Is the county
I had to
commission...
tell you that we had a flood during that time when it was totally dug up and all my dirt went down the McClellan Creek and McElroy Creek, and the county commission didn't make sure they put it back together correctly. I mean, there's no help from the Doddridge County Commission, I can tell you that right now.
Well, the Doddridge County Commission is not alone.
Well,
Every county commission that I've dealt with, from Virginia all the way up through northern West Virginia, county commissions are kind of weak. Yes, sir.
It sounds like a lot of you all really don't want this, and it sounds like you need to collectively get together and not do anything and act collectively together to stop this and stop them from becoming
I've got to say, I've gone to a lot of these meetings in the last 3 weeks. I have never seen such large meetings everywhere we go. From whatever county in Virginia, we had over 300 people in Virginia the other night. In a small town called Linside, West Virginia, the night before last, it's in Monroe County. We had 125 people show up.
And just to piggyback on what you're saying, Steve, that mayorproject.org is a way for all the organizations that are working together to oppose this to kind of connect. And there are large groups of people in all of these counties opposing this. The Monroe County Commissioners, they're getting ready to ask them to issue a statement in opposition against it. So other counties, if you want to see what's happening where folks are really ahead of the game in Floyd County, Virginia, and some of you may have heard this, Floyd County heard about the Mountain Valley Pipeline coming through. They got very engaged very quickly, and all of a sudden they changed the route around Floyd County into Montgomery and Roanoke counties. Now, the EQT people are saying publicly that activism from within the citizens there had nothing to do with them changing the route. However, just the fact that they mentioned it indicates otherwise. So there are counties, and what Floyd has done is basically offered all of their resources to any other county. So we're replicating some of what they did in Floyd down in Monroe County and Summers County and Greenbrier. And I'm happy to share that with the Watershed Association here, so you all have those same resources to start coalescing around this.
yes, I'd like to ask a question. What is the statute of limitation for suing the gas company after they've been on your property?
For what?
Well, I had a contract that was ironclad, and they broke almost everything on the contract, and they just lied more or less about everything. And I got a lawyer. There was a sign along the road that says, gas company problems, call this number. The guy's from Buchanan. Well, he took all my information and all my pictures and all the contracts and all that stuff. He called me, this was a year ago, he called me the other day and says, you have a wonderful case and it's a sure thing to win. He says, but I'm going to drop you as a client. So I'm wondering if maybe the statute of limitations is up and I wasted all my time.
No, be careful. Yes, be careful of who you hire. This has happened in other states, in other areas.
Absolutely.
Where then the gas company will come in and hire your attorney.
Well, that's what I think.
They drop your case
Yeah.
because they're getting paid from the gas
That's
company.
what I thought. I thought he was bought off.
And not only that, I mean, I'm a lawyer. There are a lot of incompetent lawyers. I mean, it's just a fact, right? There are too many lawyers.
I know some
Well, what is
incompetent
the
doctors, so
statute
don't
of
feel bad.
limitations?
They're incompetent at everything, right? And there are some, on the other hand, there are some very competent lawyers who care about people and will try to help you. So that is absolutely right. You need to be careful about who you hire, seek recommendations. You shouldn't hire somebody from a billboard. That's my first recommendation.
It's not even a billboard, it's...
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, in Doddridge County, you can't find anybody that'll take up your cause. So
Well-
to see a sign that says, hey, I'm on your side, you know, that's pretty, you know,
I
pretty
understand.
good.
If you'll see, we
There are no
can help you.
practice
What
Find
is the
somebody.
statute of limitations?
Depends, it completely depends on what it's anywhere from 2 years to 6 years, depending on what we're talking about. And I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I'll say one thing, and I don't know who his lawyer was or what he or she did,
Report them to
but
the
one of the
ethics
main ways to commit malpractice, if you're a lawyer, is to take somebody's case, sit on it, and let the statute run. I mean, that's the first thing you learn in law school is, whatever you do, don't sit on a case and let the statute
Well,
run.
I've got an opinion. Don't trust anybody out there when it comes to this gas stuff. The gas companies, all they do is lie.
Well, I don't quite agree with you about that. A lot of them will. I spent a lot of time on coal issues, and in southern West Virginia, the coal industry is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the gas industry is up here. And most lawyers are afraid, either incompetent or afraid to challenge the coal industry. But there are a handful of people who are willing to do it and have been very successful. And I'm sure if that's not the case here yet, it will be, because like it or not, gas is going to become part of your life. I'm sure it already is, but even more part of your life in this part of the state as we turn from coal to gas. So, yes.
One other thing you haven't brought up, dealing with these pipelines.
Yes.
The pipeline didn't go across my property. They told me how much money I was going to lose, and they'd go another way. I said, see you later. So they did. But what I didn't know was coming compressor station.
Yeah.
And that thing is close enough that I'll never be able to open my bedroom window again.
Really?
Yeah, because it's too noisy.
Right.
Okay?
And that's for a small pipeline, right?
No.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, it's only a 16-inch pipeline.
Well, what they're pulling through the compressor stations around here that's doing the Marcellus shale gas, some of the, quote, production pipelines that are pulling the gas from the different well pads are actually 24 and 36-inch lines, okay? And they need a compressor station every 7 miles because the gas is so wet to get it to the plants where they do it, all right? The compressor stations that they're putting in are taking acres of land.
Sure.
The horsepower, and Tom Bond might know better, the horsepower that's involved. They'll have 10 or 12 of these cooling fans that are humongous.
Yeah, it's a giant
And
industrial facility.
24/7, and it's
Lights?
the lights, etc. I mean,
What about, they're not required, obviously, because when I heard about it, it was, by the time I realized what was going on, it was already halfway finished, because we were out of state.
Well, the one thing about...
But is there was there required to be any kind of impact study or anything to be done on those?
Yeah,
at
so
all?
it should be part of the
All right,
process.
I'm within probably 800 feet of this thing.
Yeah, okay, but this
Never
is for
heard
the
of
new pipeline, because I don't know what you're talking about, whether...
No, this is new, just come off Marcellus.
These are
They've already
production.
built it, you're done.
They're
Unfortunately,
production.
if it's
They're
built...
production pipelines.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but shouldn't the people, see, everybody, I'd say, well, between me and this thing, everybody in between got money either from the three-phase power that was fed to it or the pipeline. So they don't have a right.
Right.
I didn't get a penny, don't want a penny of it, but do I have a foot to stand on?
Well, you would have potentially, and I have no idea, a nuisance case against the thing. So if you could find a lawyer to represent you for nuisance, you could sue the company for creating a nuisance. That's a hard case. I mean,
that was somebody I never even saw. I thought that somebody asked me, well, were you ever contacted about an impact study? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, well, if it's already built, they're past that
it's
stage.
built and operational.
Yeah. The only thing, saying a nuisance is the interference with the use of your property, or enjoyment of your property. If it interferes with your enjoyment of your property, then it's a nuisance.
Yes, but
those are hard cases.
I brought that up for just, we talk about the pipe, but these are things the average people don't talk, and what you call pig outs.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
Yeah.
Does everybody ever know what a pig out is?
Yeah.
Okay, some people probably don't. They need to understand all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Because once they get in there, if they require one on your property, there's nothing you can do about it.
The only thing I can say is that they require, I believe, them to buy the property for a compressor station and not just have an easement.
Yeah, they have to buy the land.
Oh yeah, they paid, gave guys $7,000.
But if you're a neighbor, and it's like the pipeline, let's say that if you have a farm and the pipeline is near you but not on your farm, they're going to come and spray pesticides on that pipeline. Now those pesticides will drift on your farm, I don't know if you care about that or not, but a lot of people do. I talked to a beekeeper last night and the night before last in Monroe County who breeds, he's not just a beekeeper, but he breeds queens, and he's a pretty sophisticated apiary, and he doesn't own the property, but it's coming within 100 yards of him. And he's got a lot of money invested in his bees, and so if you have an organic farm or bees or any of that kind of thing, I think the pesticides are quite an issue.
Is that gonna be a leg stand on?
Yes.
Okay, I've been thinking very seriously about bees. And I'm not just joking, but that pipeline that didn't go across my property is 25 feet from the property line, because that's a minimum they can.
Yeah, there are a lot of things like that. So why don't we, unless anybody has a burning question, why don't we stop now, and then we can talk to people individually if you want, or unless there's something that's really important that somebody wants to ask.
I just want to say very quickly, the sign-in sheets that I brought around here, these are to get on our listserv. This is the email list that I use to get out information about the FERC online commenting period and upcoming public meetings. So if you are interested in getting emails from me, I don't write a lot of them. What I write is important. I won't fill your inbox with nonsense, but this is a way to stay in touch with us, and I would encourage you to put your
Please sign up. Please sign up so that we can make, everywhere we go, we're getting sign-up sheets so that we can make try to start a movement in the state. Yes.
More than one around.
Yes, I have it.
I think it's obvious that sometime this will come to an end. Now, there are some of us that are very skeptical about how long it's going to last. And there are people who have ideas about it lasting an exceedingly long time. But one of the things that I have observed is nobody is thinking about what's going to happen when it's over. These wells need to be plugged. These pipelines, some kind of arrangement has to be made. Either it needs to be taken out, an agreement that it needs to be taken out of the ground, or an agreement that it's going to stay there. Now, the pipelines will be cleared. They'll be kept cleared with pesticide, herbicide, because nobody's going to go to the trouble to do all that work and use all that fuel on the dangerous ground with fresh hogs. So it's going to be
It's a huge problem.
used. Okay.
In West Virginia, mostly conventional, shallow wells, there are tens of thousands of unplugged wells in this state right
And there are
now.
going to be that many Marcellus wells too if something isn't done about it, because the way they taper off in just a year and a half or 2 years and then become stripper wells for an indefinite length of time, it's an ideal situation just to leave them in the ground. With the pipelines though, you don't have any forestry crop as long as the pipeline's operating. And then it takes 70 years after that for a tree crop to get started and get to the stage where it can be utilized again. So there's a lot of time and a lot of trees that aren't going to get to grow on these pipelines. If you have to worry about whether they're going to come back and take that out of the ground, it makes it even longer.
I agree. There's a great book I read a long time ago. It's called The World Without Us. And it's like, what would happen if humanity suddenly went away? And the refineries would start to explode. It's just it's a remarkable thing about how the planet would basically self-destruct because of all the things we've left undone that need humans to continually monitor and make sure they keep going, from refineries to power plants to nuclear power plants. So you're right. Human observation and care of things is really important, and I think we know we don't have a very good track record of that and other things. Yes? I'm trying to...
It's not really a question, but I'm with Dodger County Watershed Association. We just wanted to let everybody know that we meet every third Thursday here at 6 o'clock. You guys are interested in all of this. We talk to people about it and try to help people with spills and water issues.
The other question is, we have a really good turnout tonight, and we know that there are people from Doddridge County and other counties. Are you folks interested in us sponsoring more informational meetings like this related to the issues that are affecting us? Show of hands if you're interested in us. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's
it. Thank you. We'll be around if
Thank
you
you
have
all so
individual
much.
questions.
Talk to
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.